The Nether, the fiery hell region of Minecraft, is one of the game's most iconic features, and is arguably the greatest challenge that a player faces in their journey. One false move could mean the end of your game, and you could lose everything to the fiery abyss. However, the Nether is incredibly useful to the player, giving access to powerful potions, formidable bosses with valuable drops, and towering structures with lucrative loot. More importantly, some of the items found within the Nether are also required to beat the game. And not only this, but the Nether can be used to create Nether highways which allow the player to traverse the world at unmatched speeds. This is the story of how a themed map named Hell became one of the most iconic features of Minecraft, and how its many changes shaped the game that we know and love today. The original version of the Nether was actually an in-dev map named Hell, which was released on January 7th of 2010, over 13 years ago. In-dev maps were designed to test various survival elements of Minecraft and different map features. These tests were made with the idea of providing core elements to the survival aspect of Minecraft in the future. This specific theme, which was called Hell, featured significantly lower light levels, meaning that hostile mobs would constantly spawn. Additionally, the water was replaced with lava and grass was replaced with dirt, leaving an ugly, barren terrain. Mushrooms would also grow on the surface of the world in abundance, however, crops would only grow one level per day. There was also a dark fog added to the map itself, creating an even dimmer landscape for the player. This dark and barren landscape was the first version of what we now know as the Nether, or what Notch had initially seen it as, which was Hell. While this is a far cry from the region that we know today, there are still many similar features such as massive lava lakes, low light conditions, and a barren landscape. However, as we know, there was far more work to be done, and Notch was just getting started. Notch continued to tease the release of the Hell dimension through the development of Minecraft Alpha, and mentioned that it would be used as an alternate fast travel dimension. This was actually in reference to the novel The Wheel of Time, where people would use a transport system called the Ways to travel massive distances over short periods of time. This also gives the impression that the Nether was actually primarily intended to be used for travel purposes. In the Minecraft Halloween update, it was teased that players would be able to enter a brand new Hell world for fast travel, where players could portal in, move 10 meters, portal out, and be hundreds of meters away. Notch would continue to tease this new dimension with multiple leaks of new mobs and blocks such as soul sand and ghasts being posted to his Tumblr. On October 29th, Notch mentioned that he was still looking for a name for the new dimension. Some of the considered options for this were The Slip and The Nexus. However, since Notch did not feel these names would fit the nature of Minecraft, and he did not want to use an existing religious name, these were scrapped. On October 30th, Minecraft Alpha version 1.2.0 was released, adding the Nether, along with Nether-exclusive mobs and blocks. When the Nether was initially released, it comprised only a few blocks and mobs, which were netherrack, soul sand, and glowstone, along with zombie pigmen and ghasts. However, this was still a very different region than what we know today. Firstly, the terrain of the Nether was generated in a similar structure to islands in an ocean, with massive lava lakes surrounding them, making it very difficult to get around. Only ghasts and pigmen would spawn, and overall the region was very bland and boring. Despite this, there were still some very interesting features such as glowstone, which was a new method of lighting, and of course the fast travel of the region, where every block travelled in the Nether would translate to 8 in the overworld. An interesting feature was that beds in the Nether would not explode, with the player simply unable to use them. The Nether would remain in this state until the update of May 2011, when portals were made to function in the multiplayer servers. At this point, the Nether was mainly treated as a cool side region to explore by the Minecraft community, but not much else. This all changed in September of 2011, when the next major update to the Nether was teased by Jeb, with hints of new terrain generation and a massive new structure meant to be the ultimate challenge for players. Finally, on November 18th, 2011, over 1 year after its initial release, the Nether finally received an update that gave it purpose. The new Nether fortress contained blazes and netherwort, along with valuable treasures for players to discover. Players finally had a reason to go to the Nether, as the blaze rods dropped by blazes could only be found in the Nether fortress, which were needed to craft the Eyes of Ender required to find strongholds. In addition to the new blaze and magma cube mobs, ghasts would now drop ghast tears, and zombie pigmen would drop gold nuggets. These, along with the nether wart found in the fortresses, were ingredients in crafting potions, which gave players access to powerful short-term buffs. For the first time since its release, the nether had a functioning role in Minecraft, and was more than just a cosmetic addition to the game. The nether continued to receive significant updates over the next couple of years, such as nether wart being able to grow in any region and zombie pigmen picking up and wearing armor, in the patches 1.3.1 and 1.4.2 respectively. Additionally, mobs could now travel through nether portals, which was a critical part of later farms built in the nether. However, the most notable change of this time period was the addition of nether skeletons to the fortresses, which dropped skulls needed to craft the Wither boss. The Wither gave players access to a challenge comparable to the Ender Dragon, and would drop the Nether Star upon being defeated, which allowed players to craft a beacon. Beacons allowed players to keep track of their bases from extremely far away and would give players noticeable buffs within the smaller radius. In version 1.5, Nether quartz ore and blocks were added to the game, giving the Nether a very unique block that could be used for builds, and more importantly, a very efficient way for players to gain XP without having to build a farm. Not long after this, 1.6.1 added chests to the nether fortresses, allowing players to obtain valuable items such as diamonds and armor by exploring them. However, the major issue of the nether still persisted, which was the lack of diversity within the region. Despite all of the updates and changes made to the region, players still found it quite repetitive, even with all of the new mobs, bosses, and structures that had been added in recent years. The issues that were present during the initial release still persisted. Terrain generation was stagnant and dull, and there was not much variety from one world to the next. In short, the nether got very old, very fast. 1.10, released in 2016, showed some slight improvements with new blocks being added, as well as endermen being able to spawn within the region. However, this was the last update that the nether would receive for the next couple of years, with the next being in 2018, when vertical air pockets similar to ravines were added to terrain generation. Despite these changes, it still felt like the nether and its terrain were missing quite a bit, and that there needed to be a large change made in order to make the region interesting again. For the most part, the nether had received very few changes in this regard since its release in 2010, with a very short list of activities for players, and very repetitive gameplay. Aside from the nether highways and farms, the nether was mostly viewed as a convenience and not much else. Players wanted more than what was offered, and in version 1.16, their prayers were answered. On the 3rd of June 2020, the Nether update was released, bringing drastic changes to the region. Terrain generation was massively updated, with 4 new biomes being added to the Nether. These were the Warped Forest, Crimson Forest, Soul Sand Plains, and Basalt Deltas. The Warped Forest was a cyan forest, which had a very high spawn rate for endermen and highly growing trees. The biome was also covered in creeping vines and a blue fog, which gave it a mysterious atmosphere. The Crimson Forest was a more typical forest in the Nether, featuring new crimson nylium blocks as the floor, and a new light source found in the trees of the region called Shroom Lights, which looked like a smoother, more golden version of glowstone. The region was also a host to the new Hoglin mob, which were giant boars that would attack the player unprovoked. Piglins could also be found here, which were an odd cross between zombie pigmen and villagers. These creatures acted as traders in the Nether, offering diverse amounts of loot in exchange for gold bars. These 2 new forests gave players access to fuel, food, and resources in the Nether, and were very different from biomes of the past. Soul Sand valleys, primarily composed of soul sand and its new counterpart soul soil, formed large flat regions which boasted high ghast and skeleton spawn rates. Massive skeletal structures could be found, perhaps remnants from a different time, and blue fire littered the landscape. The final and most diverse biome was the Basalt Deltas, which had towering columns of new basalt and blackstone blocks. The region was littered with magma pools and lava lakes, forming a very dangerous terrain for players to traverse. Not only this, but magma cubes would spawn in much higher frequencies in this biome, threatening to knock the players into the fiery pools. In addition to these new biomes, nether gold ore was also added, giving players easy access to gold within the nether. The most formidable change to the nether, however, was the addition of the new bastion structures, which took the form of one of 4 different ruined castles, with each one of these being unique in its structure and layout. These structures were filled to the brim with loot, which was fiercely guarded by pigling brutes, the newest addition to the game. These powerful guards boasted some of the highest stats in the game, and were a formidable adversary to any player that dared challenge them. The most valuable loot of the Nether was the new ancient debris, which gave players access to netherite ingots that could be used to upgrade armor beyond diamond items, and these could only be found by either mining tirelessly through the Nether, or by finding them in these bastion structures. Ancient debris gave the Nether a resource that players would only be able to find within it, and was a clear upgrade over anything that could be found in the overworld. The Nether now had many different resources that players were incentivized to farm, with netherite, potion materials, blaze rods, and the wither all being extremely useful to the player in various ways. The wishes of the players had been granted by the developers, and now, more than ever, the Nether had a stable place in the game, and the new terrain generation and structures, as well as the unique loot, gave players a reason to stay and explore. No longer was the Nether a bland and boring hellscape, as it now boasts diverse terrain and regions, and players had the thrill of adventure that the Nether previously lacked. The Nether had found its place in Minecraft, and at long last, its journey was complete.